Give you a chance, nobody with that. I'd just like to address a question to Govind. I mean, taking off from where Mani Shankarji sort of left off, that it should be, whether it should really concern itself with pricing. So the question is, because Govind is the editor of, he's the promoter editor of India Spends, and it's really a difficult question. How do you price it now? Just if you read about it, I mean, the Rangarajan Commission has got its own way of doing it. It's a bit intricate, and we've seen it that it's they go by an average of. I'll just read it out. It's a bit technical, but just bear. Rangarajan suggested a pricing formula in which the final base price is arrived by a simple average of the respective weighted averages of the price of imported gas through sectors over a 12-month period, and that of prices in the three major international gas trading hubs. These are the US Henry Hub, the UK National Balancing Point, and Japan's customs cleared rate. Now, all this is a bit double Dutch to us, but maybe, Govind, what do you think of this Rangarajan sort of Formula A? And B, I mean, there are, of course, reports saying that the sort of the gas heads in the US were under strict control of the government of the United States for years. It was only later on that these things got opened out, and governments in the US found it necessary to keep it under strict control of direct government gas pricing, which would be easy and which would not be as per market forces. So you have various different sort of views on that. So what do you think? I mean, especially in terms of the figures that are bandied about.
Gurpreet, thanks. I'd love to answer your question, but I have no clue about gas pricing. So let me begin at that note. The reason is, I think it's a very complicated issue. It involves formulas and stuff which people with much time and energy have gone into it. So I don't want to get into that. I think there are 2 or 3 points which are worth considering. I think first is that it seems to me that it's logical that we should move towards some sort of free pricing, given the fact that you don't have a benchmark easily available for gas, as opposed to, let's say, you have for oil. Oil, I mean, every evening we know where Brent is trading and so on. And gas, that's a problem. So therefore, we have all these attendant issues. I think the second one is, if you look at gas production from KGD6, it has been coming down, right? So you could say, or someone could say, and some people have been saying that, oh, Reliance is hiding the gas, right? So I don't know. It doesn't seem to me that they would hide the gas. There's something wrong with either the estimates as we went into production or with the output that we are seeing today. So the fact is that gas production is coming down, right? And the data is there, both from the government as well as Reliance, and you can correlate the two. The third is, if gas production has to be raised up again from KGD6, it requires investment. And I'm guessing that's why Reliance wants to raise the price so as to fund that investment. Now, whether it's justified or not, I don't know. Right? But the fact is that there is investment required. Then we come to the larger question of how do you fundamentally invest in stepping up oil or gas production in this country? To me, neither this book or any other book does not provide that answer, because that's something we should be fundamentally asking if we are importing 80% of our requirements. And this is a question that any developing country should be staring at with alarm and some sense of urgency. The fourth is, we are in the press club, and I think this is where I would raise a larger question, is that for whatever reason, I think Reliance has been very prickly about this issue, right? Including, let's say, making friendly calls to people like me saying, do you know that when you speak tomorrow, we have a legal case against Orange. So I think someone should figure out why they are so prickly about it. I mean, I was just looking at the numbers. I mean, segment revenue for Reliance, I don't know. I mean, I'm just looking at the numbers here as things stand today. So 431 crores total revenue. Petrochemicals is 88,000 crores. Refining is 333,000 crores. Oil and gas is only 8,200 crores today. Arguably, there's a lot of potential. There's a British Petroleum investment, and the stakes are high, and so on. Right? But I think that question needs to be thrown out there. Okay, so one, why is Reliance so prickly about it? B, why is media also equally somewhat silent about it? Right? I mean, let's address this issue head on. Right? And if the issue can be answered with data, as I would prefer to do it, then let's answer it with data. I mean, how much oil, how much gas are we producing? How much is there? How much can be found? What are the geological estimates saying for this part of the world? And can we afford to do it? I mean, we have to acknowledge that this is a difficult part of the world to drill for gas. These are, the ONGC did not find gas in the same place, and Reliance went in there subsequently and found something. So you have to give them credit for that. There was the level of engineering and technological investment that's happened in this perhaps is higher than anything that's happened before. So that's given. But on the other hand, this issue is obviously goes beyond the engineering and the resources issue that is sort of confined to, let's say, KGD6 or any gas field and so on. And to me, that remains a mystery of sorts. And I think that's a question we should be asking. The last and final question I'd really ask is that, I think Paranjoy talked about resources, right? Last 10 years, we've seen a lot of resource-related controversies in this country, which perhaps is an outcome of the development and the economic growth that we've seen. I would believe that the level of investigation and investigative journalism that's happened in that world is still a long way to go. I think Paranjoy has done a little bit. I'm not saying that the investigation needs to necessarily turn up all kinds of, scams and evil intent and design and so on. But there's something, surely things have gone wrong. And I think A, people should do it. B, there should be a climate where we should be allowed to do it in a without, being necessarily served legal notices on every turn. I'll stop there.
Paranjoy, there are a lot of questions which you can, sort of wrap up in the last round. Like what he's saying that, it's an open thing whether really Reliance has sort of fudged on the quantity of gas. Now, your say in the book is clearly that they have. Now, we'll come to that. But before that, I'll just have Kumar take one question. He's been avoiding, he said he won't speak much, but I'll still put it to him that he's been a sort of fair supporter of the Congress party. Do you think that, this allegation which Paranjoy makes throughout the book is that ultimately, ministers were removed. Jairam Ramesh was removed and Mr. Moily brought in Jaipal Reddy, and after Jaipal Reddy, Moily. And was that jump really, do you think that Reliance has such a hold on government that they do this?
Well, actually, I don't think anybody can understand the intricacies. Hello? Well, actually, nobody can understand the intricacies of ministry formation and the influences they have to suffer or they have to handle while changing the portfolios or sacking ministers or transferring them. So I can't answer that. The question of Congress, non-Congress doesn't arise there at all. What matters, however, is that it is a fact, and I think everybody knows it, that Reliance grew. When I was in those days a reporter of the Economic Times, I could actually see, I was witness to the rise of the Reliance when Congress government was there. When Pranab Mukherjee was the Commerce and later on Finance Minister. I have seen that. So the question of business and political relationship is not something so, kind of sanctimonious. It was known, it was published, everything was known. Even editors were given debentures at that time to support certain political and financial lobbies. So I am not going into that. The question that needs to be understood is that if this, your title also says, and book also says, crony capitalism. Now this idea or this so-called terminology of crony capitalism has come in vogue only in last 4 or 5 years, while crony capitalism has been there even before. The earlier term, not exactly copy term, the earlier term in America was also turbo capitalism, which has nothing to do with crony capitalism. That existed. Turbo capitalism, there is also a book. But earlier to that, in the 19th century, when the business and political relationship began to evolve, in 19th century America, they called it straightforward by what it means, which was known as robber baron capitalism. And that's a term used in economic discussions all over the world, particularly in European left. Robber baron capitalism directly means you take over the control of the government, and you meaning corporates. That time even the word corporate was not there. It was regularly known as a simple term called capitalism. So the capitalists were not called industrialists that time. They were called capitalists and they were not called corporates. So that robber baron capitalism later on became crypto capitalism, then became turbo capitalism, and now we are with the stage of crony capitalism. They are not similar terms. This term has a different connotation, but I have not read the book so fully because it's so dense and it is so full of data and so much full of inferences and quotations and reports and analysis of figures one gets bogged down. So I have not completed the book. I don't think I will be able to in a short while. It's not some mystery, but it is a mystery. I mean, the book is about a mystery, and therefore I think the relationship between robber baron capitalism, which perhaps began in the 1980s, whichever government, Congress or otherwise, now has become full-blown with the arrival of Narendra Modi government. I think Narendra Modi government actually represents the sanctioning by the people, by the democratic forces of robber baron capitalism. So it did not start with Narendra Modi, it perhaps started with Manmohan Singh, and the book does not even mention Narendra Modi.
But Jaipal Reddy was not removed by Narendra Modi.
No, that's what I'm saying. So Narendra Modi doesn't come in picture, BJP doesn't come in picture,
So therefore,
that's what I'm saying.
so why should we leave the Congress off the hook?
No, I'm not. In fact, I said the Congress, during Congress time, the Reliance grew, and I was witness to it as a reporter. That's what I said. Yeah. Congress cannot be off the hook. No government can be off the hook because we are in a capitalist country. We are not in some socialist country. We may have the dream of socialistic pattern of society, not socialism. Socialism came into the constitution only in 1976 during emergency. So there is nothing like socialism on. Though some people say that socialism has been buried and socialism has been defeated, I think there was no socialism, there was capitalism. But capitalism with some kind of mixed economic structure in which public sector did have some commanding rights, wrongly, rightly, that's a different economic debate. I am not absolutely not giving Congress off the hook. The point is, the book actually talks about how Reliance relationship with the government began, at which point, and actually refers post 1980 and after the arrival of gas and oil. So I think what he has said is about the relationship, and Manmohan Singh is one of the persons. So actually Manmohan Singh becomes the villain, or the Congress government becomes a villain, or the UPA government between 2004 and 2014 becomes a villain. So I'm not blaming Modi at all. What I'm saying is, with arrival of Modi, whatever was started in 2004 has come full blown, and now robber barons have come to power. That's the only point I can
So we'll go back to Paranja. So these specific questions which both Manishankar ji and Kumar have not answered, maybe you can try to do that.
Okay. I'll go back in time. And I'll go in the reverse order. Kumar ji, I agree this book is long, it's dense, it's filled with a lot of technical details and contractual details. I've tried to spice it up in little bits and pieces despite the opposition of my co-authors. I've mentioned about one, Tina Munim, who starred in Desh Pardesh and who was closely linked to the late Rajesh Khanna. I thought that in between, if people get bored of the technical details, they might like to know a little bit about what happened during those days, and about the late Sandeep Tandon and Anu Tandon, who was a member of parliament. But yes, I must tell you, there is references to Narendra Modi in the book. There's an entire annexure on Gujarat State Petroleum Corporation, and there's also a reference to yeah, that's correct. It talks about Saurabh Patel, who is a very powerful minister in Gujarat, and he happens to be related by marriage to Shri Mukesh Ambani. I mentioned that he is holding the portfolios of energy, petrochemicals, mines, minerals, salt, printing, planning, tourism, civil aviation, labor and employment in the Gujarat government. Yeah, I'm merely stating facts. So there are some references to the government, but as you know, the book ends with on the 24th of March, by which time Mr. Modi was still then just a prime ministerial candidate of the Bharatiya Janata Party. He hadn't become the prime minister of India. What the points that Govind has made are extremely valid. I have really nothing to say. I'm a layperson. I'm a journalist. I've tried to unravel, demystify, at the end of the day, all these complexities. I've tried my level best. I must also set the record straight. 4 legal notices have been served on me and my co-author. No court of law has been moved. It is, you can purchase this book from here or through Flipkart, through Amazon, anywhere. There is no cease or desist order. Just because some lawyer tells me I should pulp every single copy of the book, I'm not obliged to listen. I've replied to the lawyer. As Mr. Manishankar has rightly pointed out, I've spent hours and hours and hours and days with the representatives of Reliance. Their version has been given in full, in considerable detail. Entire annexures before their new fancy booklets had came out are there. their version has been given in full. I have merely suggested that there is another version. It is not I, but the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, which says you should pay $1.8 billion, and now that number is going to go up to $2.4 billion as penalties, okay? Because you shouldn't have recovered your costs in this manner. It's not I. It's the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas. It is not I, but the Controller and Auditor General of India says that the whole investment multiple was worked out in a certain way where it didn't work into the interests of the government or the people of this country. So all of these are opinions. And yes, I have quoted different opinions of different people at different points of time, including Reliance's opinion. If at the end of the day, I still believe Mr. Mukesh Ambani is an oligarch, well, if they should take me to court then, if I've criminally defamed him, because defamation is a criminal offense in this country. So I wanted to set the record straight also as far as my well-wisher, Mr. Manishankar Rai is concerned. I have merely suggested that he was not sacked. His temporary and additional charge was removed from him under extraordinary circumstances. I, as a good journalist, have made some inferences. I was said, unlike his successor, Shri Murli Deora, he wasn't invited by George W. Bush for breakfast at the White House. I also suggested that the WikiLeaks documents that came out suggested that he was excessively enthusiastic of the IPI before it became TAPI and UTAPI and KURUTAPI and all that kind of thing. And the Americans weren't exactly favored. It is not I, but David Mulford, the then ambassador of the US, who allegedly has been quoted telling his superior in the State Department that, he and the Ambanis were not exactly the best of friends. It's not I, he has been quoted at WikiLeaks. And finally, what I found truly extraordinary, that some years after he ceased to be Petroleum Minister, Mr. Manishankar Rai, at a closed-door meeting, had the temerity to suggest that when the price of gas went up on 2.34 to 420, very easy numbers, 234, 420. It was the empowered group of ministers headed by Pranab Mukherjee, who was the then external minister, and Mr. Manishankar Rai, not I, suggested that 420 is a number which has a special connotation for the people of this country. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, Paranjoy, considering the amount of names you've called the Ambanis,
no names.
No, one second. I'm surprised they only, stopped at giving you a notice. They should be sort of hauling you in the course much more. But I mean, apart from jokes, I would just ask Manishankarji a question. I mean, I know your focus is on gas security, on energy security, and not pricing. But taking off from where we are, they've given themselves 3 months, the new government. They want to come out with some pricing. How do you think, we should go forward on this? How do you think the government should be handling it, where pricing is concerned?
There are very strong personal and political reasons for which I wouldn't wish to give any good advice to this government. Let them hang of their own accord. They have been raving and ranting against equitable burden sharing, and the first thing they have done on arrival in 30 days is not only to fail to rein in inflation. Onions are selling at 100 rupees. Tomatoes, fortunately I don't have to buy them. Sunit has to do that. She's apparently throwing up at what she has to put out. The price of food grains in the open market has already shot up hugely. They've recently raised railway fares for passengers by more than 14%, by over 6%, I think. So if this is the way in which they want to hang themselves and twist slowly in the wind, then I'm going to be like Madame Defarge. I shall be knitting as I watch this government go towards the political guillotine. I have no advice to give them.
But suppose you were appointed as the Minister for Petroleum.
I would refuse categorically to belong to dip my fingers in the same rivers of blood. I would refuse. So my basic argument is the Ministry of Petroleum should not be concerning itself with gas pricing. And it doesn't matter which government did this. I don't think it is our job, certainly with NELP still in place. And this contract having been signed, it's a NELP 1 contract. It was signed at a time when it was believed that there should be no government interference and that it should be determined through price discovery in the market. And that being so, allow the price to be discovered in the market. And there are so many ventures that fail because the investor has not estimated the market correctly, that if this one also fails for that reason, should we be departing from the fundamental principle that the prices of petroleum and natural gas should be determined in the market rather than state administered? So therefore, if they are going to retain this situation, then let them. I don't think it's going to make a material difference as to whether it goes up by 5 rupees or 10 rupees or 20 rupees. What will remain is that the government will become responsible for the pricing of a product whose price really should be discovered in the market.
Govind, you were saying?
No, I think I still
And
have.
then we'll give it to the audience.
No, I think I still have a question. I think, which I mean, like I said, if you were to look beyond the book, I think, where is the energy going to come from, and how are we going to fund it? I think it's a very simple question. I think, and we should answer that. I mean, even while we talk about crony capitalism. I think the second issue is that, to me, I mean, I've read the book. Crony capitalism can be also a loose term. I mean, it's a specific term, but it also can be a loose term. Is it somehow inevitable that we would have crony capitalism because every business is linked to some form of government presence or government role?
I don't think it's a loose term. You see, capitalism as a system existing in the US, there is government, which there is some firewall between government and business lobbies, in the sense they represent business, but it's not linked to one particular group or one particular family. And it began to be used in South America and in Africa to some extent, where directly groups like United Fruit actually controlled the Honduras president and so on. It was in those terms in the 60s and 70s it cropped up and then it spread.
Sure, so I'm not
it had a very specific term. Whatever else.
So no, my question is that, 15 years after liberalization, are we still asking the fundamental question about role of business and politics? I think that's, to me,
We are.
hope we are.
I certainly hope we are, because there is simply no doubt that if you abandon the commanding heights of the economy, you can't just leave it empty. They're not like the Kargil Heights. Somebody will walk in. And who have walked in are the large business houses. And they are now infiltrating the media. They are going to be much more powerful in the future than they were in the past. Our model of economic development promotes oligarchies. It doesn't promote perfect competition. The gap between those who are dominant in any given sector of business and others who are in that sector of business tends to be very, very large. And of course, much larger is the gap between all of these entrepreneurs and the bulk of the people of India. And we have a democracy in which everyone has one vote and some have all the notes. Now, this is the fundamental dilemma of democracy and development that we have to somehow resolve, reconcile. And I don't think a situation in which you say that all the iron ore happens to lie under tribal land, and therefore it's more important to the country to get at that iron ore than it is to look after its tribals, is a just or fair system under which to run a democracy. Now, in Gujarat, we know that the share of the tribals in the total Gujarat population is 8%. And the 12th plan, I'm quoting an official document, the 12th plan says that of all those displaced in Gujarat in recent years, that is in the 11th plan, 76% were tribals. So is the life of a tribal more important, or a lump of iron ore is more important? These are questions which have to arise in a democracy. They were answered easily in China. You drown them in the three gorges and that's the end of the matter. But in a democracy, can you afford to step so brutally on the toes of all those who are weak and unempowered and really don't have a voice, and just hope that some made-up Patkar will rise from somewhere in order to protect those people or at least argue their cause? So this is a real issue. I don't think anyone should be ducking it. Above all, not our business newspapers. But I don't see much of a discussion on this in the pink papers. If at all there is a discussion on this, it tends to be in the EPW and then in the margin. But it's not central to the issue. I begged and begged and begged when I was doing this debating program with Soman Dasgupta that we should be given one program to discuss tribals versus development. And ultimately I got it, but very reluctantly. The budget is going to be discussed on the media in a few days from now. I bet you the poor will not be considered. The only issue is that when we raise it, it's not mentioned that the subsidies in the budget, including the entire social sector expenditure, is 4 lakh crore rupees. And the taxes that have been foregone are now amounting to over 5 lakh crore rupees per year. And the taxes that are foregone substantially benefit those who make a lot of money. Why are we not plugging the Mauritius route? Why is it that dividend income is not taxed? The profits before tax are. But then a Kargil widow gets exactly the same relief as, if I may take the name, Mr. Mukesh Ambani. So there are questions of equity that arise, and there's a large school of opinion which believes that it's completely wrong to deal with issues of equity, because issues of equity cannot be resolved, and that everyone will gain in the end, and so why are you bothered about what is distribution now? So all these are real issues. I don't think we can push it to one side.
So anyway, we are all bursting with questions. The floor is open. Maybe those who have to Paranjoy or any of the other panelists here, the one hand going up here.